Violin making is a wonderful tradition which at this point is probably almost 500 years old. And the tradition began obviously with the first violin 100 years before Stradivari and is continuing today. So I think of myself as participating in this wonderful continuing story. And luckily we have the old instruments to study, so we have the benefit of hindsight. We get to look backwards and, in a way, the Monday morning quarterback. We can see what worked and what didn't work and hopefully avoid some of the mistakes. And if we look at the cast of an historical instrument here, we can see how there's been some deformation and some, over the years, just from the pressure of the strings. So these are things to be aware of. What kinds of shapes hold up the arching and what kinds of shapes tend to collapse with the weight. So I think the instruments being made today are certainly every bit as good as the best instruments ever made, and as they're played and as they develop and as musicians discover what they can do, I think time will prove that out. It's just a question of, you have to be patient. It's about the playing. It's not about the physical age of an instrument. Certainly an instrument will age through its life, but if an instrument sits for 5 years on the shelf unplayed, I find very little change. If an instrument is played vigorously and well by a good player for 2 weeks or 1 month, 6 months, very comparatively short time, I hear tremendous changes and development in the sound. I call it development rather than changes because the instrument is still the same instrument, but it's more mature. And the old instruments that we admire, the best old instruments, that have very mature and developed sounds, for the most part have been played for 100 years or 200 years or 300 years. That's a lot of hours. And there's no way you can create that effect to start out with an instrument that's part of the natural course of the life of an instrument. A musician who's looking to buy a new violin needs to identify first what they like as violin sound. The best thing a player can do is to listen to as many different good instruments as they can. Old ones, new ones, their teachers, famous players, their friends. The more instruments that they look at and listen to, the more they learn about sound and their taste in sound, then they'll know what to select. So once they've identified what they're looking for, then it's a matter of finding more specifically what suits their style of playing, the way they make sound, their requirements. If they're playing for their own enjoyment in their living room, they don't necessarily need a huge concert sound, a soloist sound. If they have requirements to play big concertos, they need a sound which will carry over to an orchestra, carry in a big hall. So once again, you have to identify your needs. And then you simply audition these instruments and play them, and try them in different situations, see how they prove up, see how they hold up against the orchestra, see how they work with your string quartet, see how they work with the piano. And one of my personal observations that I always remind people, we're not looking, in good sound, we're not looking for sound that blends. If you're in a string quartet and you're looking for a violin, you don't want a violin that blends with the other instruments. You want a sound that complements the other instruments. It's not a real mystery which instrument is the right for you. The instrument almost seduces you and tells you this is right.